All right. So last but not least, CC, it's your turn. I just have one question to ask, right? Did you see dumb question, right? Did you see all of these top 25 picks of yours this year, or did you or are you singling out 10 in terms of revisits?
To answer your question, I have a lot of these. I mean, some of these are ones I rewatched. I have not arranged them in order of like a top 10 that I watched recently or top 10 like especially important. These are all like kind of an equal 25 best films of the last 25 years for me. Um, a couple of the restrictions I did put on myself. I will speak much shorter about anything I've brought up on your show before, and I tried to limit myself to one. I tried to limit myself to one director. But yes, my top 25 movies of the last 25 years, and this will be a little more front to mid heavy because I generally like to let things age a little bit before I'm like, I think that's one of the best movies of all time. So starting in the 2000s, moving chronologically, just out the gate, one of the best animated films that I think came out in the last 25 years. Japanese movie, Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust from 2000,
Okay.
directed by
Ooh.
Yoshiaki Kawajiri.
Yo.
Listen, I am a huge fan of the Vampire Hunter D series. I'm
Right.
slowly collecting the novels. They're awesome. I love the kind of hybrid of like neo-western, post-apocalyptic, gothic. Like there's just so much, and no movie has brought that, because the novels are insane as far as like just how many different things they're stacking on top of each other and combining to create the world of Vampire Hunter D. And the movie does such a brilliant job of synthesizing all of those different, like the film is a little bit like Fury Road, where it has the aesthetic of a chase sequence. Like essentially it's one long chase sequence, but it does such a brilliant job of, how do I put this? Like it does such a brilliant job of keeping things exciting, keeping things moving. Animation is gorgeous. This is one of those movies that if you haven't seen it, you probably think I'm exaggerating just a little bit when I say the animation is gorgeous. I cannot stress enough. It's this delightful gothic style with like all of these, like with very distinct characterizations. It feels like every background character is very distinct. It's
Yeah,
just
I didn't want to count like animated movies in my list. Because I have so many stuff like Tokyo Godfathers and stuff like that.
all right. Yeah,
Yeah,
I tried to get a kind of a range of things, but I think I've only
yeah,
ended up with like
and
3 or
something.
4
If
animated
Machina done ground us to 25, I realized that it had way more movies because like stuff like Speed Racer.
films. Oh yeah.
Oh
Well, I think
yeah,
that's the
I know
advantage.
you're a Speed Racer fan. But before you
Yeah,
resume,
yeah.
CC,
Okay.
right? There are
Mhm.
shots from Bloodlust that still play my mind. Like that one guy. Like there's just shots that
Yeah.
just scream awesome, right?
Woo!
That one guy who the werewolf guy, right? Who does the howl and then just
Yes.
the head comes out from his chest. That's been living rent free in my brain since I saw that film in
Jesus.
2000 what 102. Like it's
Yeah.
just so
Mhm.
much awesomeness in that movie, right?
All
But
right,
that's
and
all
it
I'm gonna say.
is,
Continue.
and the
Yeah, stuff like
melodrama.
Red Line, for example.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and the melodrama of it all is so perfect. Like it's like I'm not getting into too many plot details because I'm sure there are people who haven't seen this one because it's a little more on the obscure side in some circles, but the melodrama at the center of this and kind of the heightened sense of drama is like absolutely perfect. So that's 2000. From 2001, I have um, I'm making sure I get this name right. Ashutosh Gorarika Rikers Lagan.
Okay,
Best sports
that's
movie ever
Yep,
made. Like
yep, yep,
yeah,
yep,
yeah,
yep.
like hands
yeah.
down. I okay. For any audiences who are less familiar with cricket, the fact that they were able to make a cricket match this epic is genuinely, in and of itself, an absolute feat of mastery filmmaking. But it's like
Yeah.
so much more than just a cricket match movie. Like it's a post-colonial film. It's
Mhm.
the score is full of these weird little homages to Sergio Leone of all people. It is such a brilliant, like the whole first half where he's like getting the team together before the whole second half, which is the epic match. Again, the production design is perfect, but also, again, the incomparable A. Rahman soundtrack is absolutely fantastic. Like, this is one of the best musicals I think that has come out in this century so far. And like, the music is so incredibly rich, it's so incredibly character driven. The way that the music actually plays in with like the score and everything, like, it's not just like accidentally kind of slapped on there. Like, there's this beautiful weaving of the like musical sequences with the actual score itself. Like, it is an absolutely stunning film. Number 3 is technically a multiple films, and it's been talked about twice, but I'm just going to talk about it briefly, is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Peter Jackson's
Of
Lord of the
course.
Rings trilogy from 2001, 2002, 2003. Probably, for me, the end of the fantasy boom that began with Star Wars in the 70s, where there was this massive just rush of different studios trying to capitalize. And I think that the reason that I kind of consider that Lord of the Rings kind of ended that particular cycle is that after you have made Lord of the Rings, where do you go from there? Like, we've still had fantasy films afterwards, but I think fantasy that exists post Lord of the Rings exists in the shadow of Lord of the Rings. And I'm talking about the extended editions, because I genuinely think that the theatrical versions are inferior to the extended editions, because there's so many very important plot moments, especially related to certain characters, that are only in the extended versions. I think Fellowship, you could go either way, but especially when you get to Twin Towers and Return of the King, the differences between the different cuts are absolutely stunning. So yeah, Lord of the Rings is like this absolute triumph of genre filmmaking and immersive genre filmmaking, and kind of this weird transitional point between kind of this older way of making genre films as we're kind of moving more and more into the age of CGI, and we're finally starting to understand how to make digital effects work.
Right.
From
But
2000,
this early Gollum, oh gosh, what's his name? Andy Serkis. Like
yes,
pulling that shit off and nailing it here.
which would go on to be so incredibly influential going forward. Like,
it almost make my list about the Apes movies, right? Did that them nailed that?
yes,
Yeah,
I almost made my
absolutely
list as
nailed,
well. Like
Yeah.
the Apes trilogy, I almost made my list as well. Those are ones that like I might have to like revisit, but like, yeah, definitely like up there. And like, given how important motion capture and performance capture technology has become, not just to film, but like television, video games, and everything. It is genuinely incredible, and you see a lot of that stuff with Lord of the Rings.
But video games, again, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
But yeah, 2002. This is another animated movie, and one that I am going to defend putting here. One of the last films from a studio that was going through a very interesting period that, in my opinion, they kind of moved away from these types of interesting films. One of the only hand-drawn animated films from DreamWorks before they pivoted to CGI. This is Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron.
Oh wow!
2002.
Right.
Oh wow!
Okay.
I still have not seen that film, but I heard it was great. I think
How?
I think Ebert gave it a 2 thumbs up. I think he did.
Oh yeah, no. Spirit is a masterpiece. Let me be clear. This is probably one of the most intelligent neo-westerns I've ever seen, because you take the concept of the neo-western, you take so many of the tropes and the conventions, but you do apply, and I put a lot of this down to the screenwriter, John Fusco, who's the same guy who wrote Young Guns, Hidalgo, and a bunch of these other a couple other like collaborations with Walter Hill, like a lot of like very intelligent neo-westerns. And what he does here is he takes the Western, he applies a little bit of pressure to the concept of the advancing frontier and the West, but he also tells the story from the most atypical of perspectives, which is that of a horse, but also kind of this whole concept of like of the horse as like a symbol of the West in so many different ways, which I really like. But I mean, obviously for me, I think you could honestly have told this in like a slightly more abstract Fantasia type of way if you had just dropped Matt Damon's narration over the whole thing. Like I think that's unnecessary, but that's my personal opinion. But even with with his narration as Spirit, it doesn't like take away from the movie. But it's also insane because so many people think of this as a kids movie, and I'm like, y'all, yes, but this is more in the like Don Bluth type children's film type thing. And also, like, there's an argument to be made that this film can be quite harsh at times. One of my favorite things was learning that during development, the film's nickname in the DreamWorks offices was Schindler's Horse, because they were like pushing themselves to tell this story. Like they were pushing themselves to tell this story that was pretty dark, kind of violent, and had like all kinds of like really intense stuff going on. But then let me talk about aside from the animation, the thing that makes this movie work as well as it does, which is, if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I mean, the music. Because the music of this film is this amazing collaboration between composer Hans Zimmer and musician Bryan Adams. So what ends up happening is you have a film that has a very music video style of storytelling to it, with like these really powerful, really cool songs that almost, it's like Spirit is such an interesting almost musical at times, because there's so many songs that like are reflecting very specific moods and tones and moments. But Hans Zimmer composes this movie with all of this grandeur and the epic sweep of something like Dune. It's kind of incredible. And then like pairing that up with someone like Bryan Adams, like this, it's very dramatic. It's very intense. It's the kind of thing that like I remember as a kid falling in love with this movie for the first time, getting like really swept away in the emotional reality of it all. And so much of it comes down to that music. It's the kind of thing where if you hang out with fans of this movie and you just play certain songs, they will immediately get kind of like overwhelmed and caught up in it. So yeah, Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron, an absolutely beautiful, like unconventional way of telling a Western, but then also with amazingly music driven movie I find absolutely incredible. 2005. This is one I've talked about on the show, so I'm not going to talk about this too long, but Sometimes in April, Raoul Peck's drama about the Rwandan genocide. Genuinely incredible movie, telling this like kind of tale of two cities-esque Dickensian story of two brothers who find themselves on different sides of the Rwandan genocide. Of all the movies
Raoul Peck film is making it this year for me. But yeah, this Hotel Rwanda always made it my list.
Yeah, Hotel Rwanda is like I think pretty good. I like Sometimes in April a little better because there's just a couple nuances that Hotel Rwanda kind of glosses over, doesn't focus on as much, that like Sometimes in April really digs in on in a way that I find genuinely. It's a movie that I watched like a couple years ago now. I think actually last year, and it made one of my best of last year list, and I have still not stopped thinking about it over a year later. This next one from 2000, also from 2005, that wild, the juxtaposition. This is a film that, to longtime listeners of Matthew's show, this should come as no surprise whatsoever. This is the movie that I think at one point in my life, ironically, when I was younger, I was a little less honest about how I felt about. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, you know what? There isn't any film that captures the emotional intensity and has the same kind of big, epic sweep, is such immersive world building, and is such a dramatic, gothic, like dark romance, but then also like such an like absolutely epic feel to it. And the thing that it does to kind of redefine this particular franchise it is part of is something that I think like this is some of the peak of that particular franchise. I am, of course, talking about Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. Easily.
Nice. Yep.
The more I think about this movie, the more I think it is dishonest of me to not include it when I'm talking about my best films of the last 25 years.
Okay. Wow.
Like as a movie I grew up with, as a movie that like I think about a lot when it comes to like my own stories, and like low key, this being up there with things I've mentioned earlier, like Spirit or Lagan, being the kind of, or Vampire Hunter D, the kind of elevated drama that really made it easy for me to transition into opera and really get into opera and like really discover that as like something that I've really loved and even written about in a critical capacity. Revenge of the Sith is just so damn good. Revenge of the Sith is such a paradigm shift for this franchise. It's this absolute, and here's the thing. When we think about the mainstream blockbuster space, when we think about mainstream blockbusters, we don't often make room for tragedies. We do not have space. Like, because again, if you think about Revenge of the Sith as a standalone movie for a moment, I mean, obviously it's part of a series, but if you think about it as a standalone film, it's one of the darkest blockbusters that has ever been put out by a major studio. Because again, everyone like our heroes lose. One of our main heroes turns into one of our villains. The galactic democracy falls to fascism, and the bad guys win. The love interest dies. Like there's just like it is an absolute tragic movie, and you watch it and you get especially if you have any investment in the series, but even on its own, you have this absolute gut punch of watching just everything that could go wrong in this particular story. And I think that sense of tragedy is something that I wish more. It's the kind of risk I wish more blockbusters took.
Right.
And I'm not saying that just because we got an Avengers teaser that hinted that a certain character might be back, and I'm kind of remembering a time when I think blockbusters could take more risks, and maybe if we killed an important character, they could stay dead, and like we could actually deal with the ramifications of that. But yeah, as I said, genuine masterpiece. Completely shifting in tone, skipping ahead 2 years from 2007, probably one of my favorite dramedies of all time. And a film that I hold just about the entire genre of the kind of dramatic comedy too is Juno.
Wow.
Probably I adore Juno.
No.
Yeah,
Listen. This was one of Ewood's favorite films of the past decade, right? But
Really?
I said wow because I will never forget how big of a deal this movie was when it came out. And for me, this was I didn't see Arrested Development at the time. Yeah, this was my official introduction to Michael Cera.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. Juno is such an intelligent script. Juno's screenplay is the kind of thing where I'm waiting for someone to decide, let's rework this as a stage play or something, because it has all of the elements there to do that. There's so many ways in which the film surprises you. There's so many ways in which the film subverts certain expectations about certain things. There are certain ways in which you think the film is going one direction and then it goes in something completely different. There's so much empathy. Even the character in this movie that I think we all agree is the worst character is never the villain necessarily. You don't like the guy, and you do kind of look at him as kind of a loser, but the film never goes out of its way to make him the film. Even the film has some empathy for him, even if it's you're kind of a loser, but I know where you're coming from. And that's the worst character. Every character in this movie, no matter how small their role, is someone with depth and intelligence and a more well-rounded inner world to them. And one of the best casts ever assembled for a movie like this. My God. This is a that I never have any problem revisiting. It is just so good and so intelligent and so funny. My God, is this film funny? This is one of those movies where rewatching it, there are jokes I laugh at every time. And sometimes there will be jokes that I miss on previous viewings that I'll catch on new viewings and just cry laughing. I own the screenplay for this movie, and sometimes I read it by itself. Juno is so good. Moving on from 2009 is a film I've recently talked about. I actually talked about on Six Reels Deep for your horror films list. It's one of my all-time favorites, and this is Daybreakers from 2009, directed by the Spierig brothers. Again, won't talk about it very long, but definitely a movie that I adore. Is one of the most intelligent, taking a fantasy or fantastical premise or idea or a genre fiction premise and following it through to its logical conclusion is what I would say. Taking the idea of what would a world look like if the vampires won, while also being kind of noir. Very intelligent movie. Right. I am so disappointed that the Spierig brothers never became the household names they should have been, because with films like Daybreakers and some of their other works under their belt, these guys should have been a bigger deal. This is a weird film to talk about given certain recent events, but since Matthew already mentioned this one, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it and also defend putting it here. From 2009, this is Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds. Now,
of course, this is your pick, right? As far as
let me explain.
Tarantino film, right?
Listen.
Right.
I think that Quentin Tarantino, as messy as he is as a filmmaker and as messy as he is as a person, I think there are two films. His filmmaking style is this concept of taking the coolest ideas from other movies and stitching them together, Frankenstein style. I think that there are two films of his that are his absolute masterpieces. I love just about all of his movies. I've got criticisms of certain ones, but I can still watch just about any of them. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is frustrating in a particular way, but the two films of his I think are his masterpieces are Jackie Brown, which I'm noticing more and more people I've seen Paul Thomas Anderson, Guillermo del Toro, and James Gunn all said that Jackie Brown is their favorite Tarantino movie, which is insane to think about. But Inglourious Basterds, I think, is Tarantino at the height of his powers when it comes to quote unquote cool cinema, right? Because this is a man taking his favorite ideas, concepts, characters from not just World War II movies, but like guys on a mission films in general, and putting them all together into this loving collage of a movie with so many, like, it's the kind of movie where like you get sound cues from Zulu Dawn. The guy who they get to play Winston Churchill is such a nerdy cameo because he's making reference to a mercenary movie he was in called Dark of the Sun, which is really interesting and insane. Like, it's a movie made of homages and references that somehow still manages to be its own distinct art object. And I really, I think about, and I also think about how effortlessly creative it is.
Mike Myers cameos crack me up so.
Oh my god!
It takes you a hot minute to recognize it.
The bastards.
It takes you so off guard. It's absolutely insane. I think about how this movie has one of the best. I mean, this movie's got some of the best needle drops, especially when you include like, instrumental needle drops. This movie has some of the best needle drops of all time, but it also has one of the singular best, which is the film's use of a certain David Bowie song. If you know,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because that scene is amazing.
It is.
And especially since he's not just using that song, he's using the remix of that song by Giorgio Moroder from the Cat People soundtrack, which is insane. So no, Inglourious Basterds is probably, I think, if I had to explain to someone what the appeal of Tarantino is, I would definitely use Inglourious Basterds. 2011, another film that I've mentioned on your show. I think I mentioned it last year, so I will not spend too much time on it, but a Hungarian film, another animated film, 2011, Tragedy of Man.
Oh, I need to watch that. Yeah.
Yes, from director Marcel Jankovic. As I mentioned at the time, an adaptation of a Hungarian play where Satan tries to convince Adam to give up on continuing the human race by taking him through time and showing him all of the great evil that mankind will do in the future. This was famously a movie worked on by a Hungarian filmmaker who started this while Hungary was still part of the Soviet Union and only completed in 2011. One of the most gonzo animated films you'll ever see, effortlessly creative, visuals are absolutely stunning. The play itself, like the story itself behind everything, is also just really weird and interesting. Like this whole concept of Satan trying to convince Adam to give up by saying, if you continue with the human race, this is all the misery that will come about. Like, wouldn't it be better just to give up and die? And I think that even that premise is something that I think is absolutely just so worth sitting with and thinking about, to say nothing of the absolutely bonkers way in which it's presented. I don't think I've talked about this one on your show before, but from 2012, an absolutely bizarre French film, this one. And I'm not normally the biggest French cinema person, but this is one of my absolute favorites from one of my favorite French directors. This is Holy Motors by Leos Carax, 2012.
I never saw that, but I heard about how great it was.
Yeah, it was good.
I don't know how to explain Holy Motors is one of those movies that it's this bizarre, and I cannot stress bizarre quite enough. Holy Motors is this truly bizarre meditation on relationships and filmmaking and art and the characters we play. It is an absolutely stunning lead performance from Denis Lavant, who, if Bullet Travail had been made just a couple years later, Bullet Travail would have made it on this list instead. But that film came out 99 or 98, so just missed it. But aside from his genius performance in Bullet Travail, Denis Lavant's performance in Holy Motors is absolutely stunning because he plays such a mercurial character. I can't stop. It's a movie I can't stop thinking about. It's a movie that I program as often as I can show people. I never get tired of watching this movie. Moving on to not moving on, but staying in 2012. Actually, the next few are going to be 2012. But staying in 2012, is going to be the only documentary on this list, and it's a documentary that shapes kind of my entire perception of art and the world and culture and everything. And this is by director, making sure I pronounce his name again, Malik Benjelloul is Searching for Sugar Man from 2012.
Wow, I have not seen that since it came out and won that Oscar.
I love
I need to go
this
revisit that.
movie. I love a good documentary that can craft a narrative like this, and the way it crafts this narrative. But even like to me, one of the things I come back to about the film is kind of it's a brilliant way to articulate this whole concept of fame and kind of cultural impact. Because again, if you're unfamiliar, and I'm not going to say too much because you need to watch this movie. Oh my God, don't look up anything, just watch it. But essentially, it follows. It's loosely about a kind of folk singer out of a kind of like a countercultural folk singer out of Detroit in the 70s who only put out 2 albums and, you know, essentially like nothing, kind of a one-hit wonder type guy. Just came out with 2 albums and just disappeared. Except he didn't, because his albums made their way, and the doc gets into how, and it's fascinating. His albums made their way to South Africa and became absolutely massive among the like kind of like the white like Cape Townian like Afrikaner population of South Africa, especially as like, you know, we're moving into the like, you know, the most active phase of the resistance against apartheid, and then even like that the post-apartheid world, and like kind of the way in which he ends up being weirdly influential on an entire music scene in South Africa. And again, this is a guy who never was big in his native country, but then goes on to be something of a superstar. Like some of the guys they interview in this doc being like, oh yeah, he's like up there with Elvis and Bob Dylan. And it's like, you've never heard of this man. And it's again, and I think I've been thinking about this doc a lot lately because I finally rewatched it. Actually, this was one I rewatched this year, and it's absolutely stunning. But I also, there was some events that took place last year that also made me think about this doc quite a bit. So yeah, and I love the phenomenon. It talks about this whole idea of you don't know where certain things when you create art as an artist, you don't know how far that art will travel. You don't know where this piece of art that you create will land. You don't know who will discover it. You don't know what people will discover it and like what it will mean to them. And I think that there's no work of art that better meditates on kind of the nature of that relationship than Searching for Sugar Man from 2012. Getting into this is one of those. With this list, there were a couple moments where I had to kind of work backwards. I had to start with, okay, here are some of my favorite filmmakers. What would I call their best films? And with this particular director, it was a lot of personal wrestling to figure out what my absolute favorite film of his was. But after much consideration and after much real difficulty, I finally settled that from 2012, Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master is probably to me the crowning achievement of his career as a director, because I love
Ricardo, that's your film,
almost
right?
made the list.
Yeah,
almost made the list.
Listen, The Master is such a masterpiece of clashing personalities and also clashing wills, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like you get 2 of these larger than life characters, and they are both played by method actors at the peak of their craft.
Yeah.
Like Philip Seymour Hoffman versus Joaquin Phoenix playing these absolutely brilliant characters that play to their respective strengths. And like the movie falls into place from there. Like Amy Adams is also brilliant in it. The plot that there is, like, you know, facilitates these interactions. I think about the scene where the 2 of them go to jail a lot. That sequence is so good. There's just this, oh my God, like The Master is absolutely such a just stunning movie. Moving out, like last film of the 2012s is another animated film. I have more animated films on here than I expected, than I realized. I didn't notice until I put everything together. But Wolf Children by Mamoru Hosoda from 2012.
Still haven't seen that.
Oh my God. Wolf Children. Mamoru Hosoda is one of those filmmakers that I adore, but I watch him very carefully, because I know that if I go too fast, he will destroy me. Because he has this absolutely amazing ability to I don't know. He has this absolutely amazing ability to take my emotions apart and give like very much get into some of the most like interesting like the way he filters very intense, very grounded emotions actually, because a lot of films on this list have been like kind of, larger
Okay.
than life emotions or dramatic, but the way he talks about emotion in this, because at the end of the day, The Wolf Children is about the struggles of
Okay.
being a single mom,
All right. No,
right?
all right. I was confusing this with Wolf Walkers. I was like, oh,
No,
that's
no,
the
no, no.
Wolf one, but
Also a
yeah, yeah.
masterpiece.
Yeah,
Also a
also pretty good.
masterpiece.
Yeah.
Also, like,
Cause
almost.
thinking, did that movie come out so soon? I was like, wasn't that recently? I like, oh no, it's two different
No, that
movies.
one was
I don't
more
know.
recent. And
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that director's films are also
Yeah.
stunning. By the way, but like Wolf Children, because Wolf Children at the end of the day is, about a struggling single mom, like who doesn't quite know what she's doing and is trying to make sense of, of raising her children, and also just trying like genuinely just trying to make sense of like trying to be a parent and
Right.
just not knowing how to do that, and like not really there being any kind of instruction or any kind of like manual that like explains to her that she's doing everything right and how to do everything. And I think that filtering that through a genre lens where you're able to kind of communicate some of these ideas in this particular way makes this a genuinely beautiful movie. Mamoru Hosoda was another one who my rule that I couldn't include multiples from a certain directors was tough, because otherwise Boy and the Beast would have made it on here as well. That film was close. It was like
Right.
perpetually like, do I put Wolf Children or Boy and the Beast? Do I put Wolf Children or Boy and the Beast? But finally settled on Wolf Children because that film makes me cry just about every time I watch it. The next one is one I've talked about on your show, so I'm not going to stay too long on it, but it was one of my favorite films of the 2010s, and my favorite film from this director still, but that is Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer,
Right.
which is
Okay.
probably
Yeah.
one of my favorite
Yeah.
my favorite
Very
post-apocalyptic
good.
movies, because it's one of the most creative, like one of the most creative post-apocalyptic movies I've ever seen. The premise, the way it's told, how contained it is, how tight it is, how dark it is. Like, oh my God, the monologue that Chris Evans has near the end
Yeah.
about cannibalism is one of those moments I'm like, how has this man not been given more serious roles?
Yeah.
Like, I know that, like, Captain America, but also, but like it's very cynical in so many ways. Like there's so many ways in which it is very cynical. I think, I mean, it's Bong Joon-ho, so he gives you these little bits of hope, but also, yeah, but like my God, just like the presentation of it and like the creativity of it is just effortless. Moving on, keeping in 2013 actually is another. How do I talk about this? So, in the vein of musicals that aren't quite musicals, but also in incredibly grounded, rich dramas. And I might have mentioned this film in my best of the 2010s list, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But director John Carney's sophomore film, Begin Again.
Okay.
No, you never did. So I'm now hearing about this because I don't think I ever heard of it, to be honest.
John, Begin Again. I thought this one would also be up Tracy's alley, because Begin Again is very much this story of like lost souls, right? They get this young woman who's the girlfriend of a famous singer. She's played by Keira Knightley, and then you get this record producer executive guy played by Mark Ruffalo, and the movie catches them at a low point in their respective lives. Like, she came to America to be with her boyfriend who's this big pop star, but then he cheated on her, and now she doesn't quite know what she's doing here. He is going through an incredibly difficult relationship in his his professional life, but then also his marriage, and the two of them meet up or happenstance, and they come across this and they kind of stumble on this idea of creating an album recorded live across the city with as much as like stripped down. Like, so first of all, John Carney as a director, if you are unfamiliar with, is another one of those guys like Mamoru Hosoda that I have to go so slowly on, because if I speed him too much, I know he will rip my heart out. Because this is his follow-up to his low budget indie film, very similar, Once, which he came out with in, I think, earlier in the 2000s.
2007. I saw
Yes,
Once.
2007.
I love Once. I love that film. Yeah.
Once is so damn good. And like Once is like what I love about Once, aside from the kind of like, pink neorealism style of it, is that Once is so grounded in human emotions, but also like something like Juno, it understands the complexities of humans. What I love about Begin Again is that Begin Again is the kind of sophomore movie that you want from an independent filmmaker, where they take all the things that made them a brilliant independent filmmaker, but they bring those to a setting where they now have a bigger budget. And in his case, it basically means, what does he spend that money on? Kind of whatever actors he particularly wants. And the cast he assembles for this and the performances he gets out of that cast, the music is really beautiful. The performances, I think about the music for this movie like a lot, and I really love it. Also doesn't play out in a way that you would think it is, especially not given the way I described the plot. But yeah, Begin Again is a movie that I come back to over and over. It's one that just occupies so much of my mind.
I'll have to get into that one myself.
You will, Tracy.
Yeah.
You will have so many feelings. Like you in particular need to watch this movie. Talking about feelings, because the 2010s decided that the 2010s for some reason decided that I couldn't catch a break. And this was a film that was alluded to at one point, and I do need to see the film that it was mentioned in relation to, but this is the one I've seen. And again, like John Carney and like Mamoru Hosoda, Barry Jenkins is a filmmaker that I go very slowly on because I know he has great capacity to destroy me. Moonlight, 2016, is devastating. Emotionally, it is beautiful.
This was top 5 for me as far as best of the 2010s. Love that film.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, absolutely. And like stunning.
Yeah.
Like the emotional complexity, the richness of it, the structure of it. Oh my God. Like there's just so much about this movie that, especially at the time in my life when I came across it, was kind of exactly the movie I needed. And I really appreciate its understanding of the more tender side of masculinity. Related to Beau Travail, and I think this is why on the criterion for Beau Travail that I have, you actually have an interview where Barry Jenkins interviews that film's director, Claire Denis. The films have a DNA in common where they both talk about this concept of the beauty within masculinity. Because again, if you think about our society and our culture and the way we talk about these things, we don't talk about the idea that men can be beautiful. We don't talk about men having these more tender emotions. Moonlight hits in that particular area, and it acknowledges that reality. Like, words elude me. I'm trying to think of any film that had a last line that I think about quite as much as I think about the last line in Moonlight, and how sometimes I will just stare at the ceiling thinking about that last line. Like, Moonlight takes no prisoners, and it is a movie that is an absolutely masterpiece. And then, speaking of movies from 2016 that prevent me from being able to catch a break, and this is actually my last animated film of the list. This is what I consider, I'm excited because they have another film coming out that looks as if it might actually be even more ambitious. But as of the time of this recording, this is probably the grandest, the most sweeping, most potent, and most technically impressive film to come out of Leica. This is Kubo and the Two Strings, directed by Travis Knight.
Ooh, love
100% on board with that one.
Almost made the list.
Oh,
I will never forget.
100% on board with that.
Yeah, CC, I'll never forget seeing that for the first time in theaters, leaving the theater with tears in my eyes. Swear to God.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like, just also, just as a it's so funny. Just as an aside, the Regina Spektor cover of "While My Guitar Gently Weeps Over the Critics." As a Regina Spektor fan, it's just bonkers. But yeah, no, Kubo and the Two Strings is so brilliant because, like, yes, the story itself is so beautiful. It is so powerfully told, and it's so intimate. Like, Kubo and the Two Strings is such an intimate family drama type story in a way that I really appreciate. And it's got some of the emotional, it's got so much emotional nuance to it, but there's so much about it that is like so beautifully told, especially with this kind of like fairy tale fantasy quality to it in a way that I truly, absolutely, like, I just cannot get enough of. But then just even with that baseline, I can't think of another stop motion animated movie that has raised the bar for stop motion animation in the way that Kubo and the Two Strings does. Like, there have been, like, you can tell Kubo and the Two Strings signifies a shift in stop motion animated
what's his name?
movies.
Was he's is like Nike. Shrek. What's the guy's name? He's a
Which one?
son of Nike, I think.
The director
Oh,
of
I
the
know
film.
Travis Knight.
Never mind. Travis Knight.
Travis
right.
Knight. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes,
he did one of Transformers movies.
Bumblebee.
Bumblebee.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
No. Let me correct you. He did the best Transformers movie.
Right.
Because Bumblebee is so good. Like, there's a reason.
I think Transformers 1 is the best, but, you know, Bumblebee is great.
Bumblebee, come on.
Nah, Bumblebee
No, and,
better than the others. I think so. It's pound for pound one of the best, in my
easily.
opinion.
Well, I think that,
But no, he always had the run going good. You know, it's like, all right, shit. Like all of these movies are all good though.
Well, and like, this is what's so, and I think, like, and I notice, like, it's one of those things where stop motion, more than animation, like, more than, like, you know, hand drawn or CG animation, I always get the sense that stop motion animation is such an intimate world where, like, everyone involved is like paying attention to each other and what everyone is doing, because anytime someone enters the space and like pushes the medium forward, everyone else is like, okay, now we got to step up and like there is no Pinocchio without Kubo and the Two Strings, is what I'm saying. Right. Like you can tell, and like there's like even some of the more ambitious of the stop motion like stuff that like all these other people are putting out. Like, Kubo clearly signifies it's like, you know, here's what you can do with this medium. And this is why, like, I think they've got a film coming out, Wildwood, which I'm very, very excited about. Like, I'm really curious if that's going to live up to Kubo, but like, you know, even if it doesn't, I still have Kubo. Finally moving on to 2017, one film from 2017, one film. And I think this is the movie. I remember talking to a friend of mine about Oppenheimer, and he was talking about how for him, the crowning achievement, like for him, as a longtime Christopher Nolan fan, finally seeing Christopher Nolan win his Academy Award was such a moment of finally, like, I've been waiting for this, I've been rooting for this. And of course the film it was for is a film that to this friend of mine felt like it was such a summary of everything great about about Christopher Nolan. My equivalent is Guillermo del Toro's win for Shape of Water in 2018, because Shape of Water is still to this day my favorite film of 2017.
Right.
Shape of Water is everything I love about del Toro in one concise film. You got all of the like earnestness of a lot of his films, the technical mastery and the attention to detail, but also like the love of monsters. But then like we're also firmly at this point where, you know, he's tried blockbusters and he made like, and he's kind of, I think at this point, Del Toro has said all he needs to say about blockbusters with a movie that almost made this list, Pacific Rim. Although, to be fair, any movie that Del Toro made in the last 25 years was a candidate for this list. But he said all he had to say about blockbusters with Pacific Rim. And so he finally doubles down on the alternative, like the kind of art film space. But now he's got all of the goodwill and the capital and even some of the collaborators from the Oscar days. And the result is a movie that is as stunning as it is tender and beautiful, and like probably one of the most romantic, like one of the best love stories I have seen, you know, of the last 25 years, and such a like absolutely stunning film. And I think like just like as a longtime Creature from the Black Lagoon fan, it was stunning to see Del Toro pull out this aspect of the film that, you know, I've always thought, like, I think like a lot of us who were fans of this particular Universal monster, we always thought that there was something a little more romantic, a little more Beauty and the Beast lurking beneath the surface of those films. And Del Toro brings it to the surface so beautifully. So yeah, Shape of Water. This next film from 2019, and we are in the final stretch because this is the 20th film, so we are down to the last 5. So this next film is a little bittersweet because at the time I thought this was the beginning of a new chapter for this particular filmmaker. But in hindsight, it has kind of turned out to have been the culmination of this particular writer-director's, like, kind of the best that this person has been able to do with their particular style and sensibilities. And for me, that's a little sad looking back, because I think that's one of the things about reflecting on the last 25 years of filmmaking. There's filmmakers you see rise, filmmakers you see fall, people you thought were going to be bigger deals than they turned out to be.
Right.
And I think that looking back on all that, one of the filmmakers who to me was someone who at one point was very exciting and unfortunately hasn't been able to live up to this particular film is something that makes me feel a little bittersweet. But the film itself is still damn good. I am, of course, talking about Taika Waititi's Jojo Rabbit from 2019.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely belong on this. Yeah, it's almost made it.
So good. Like, probably, again, up there with Juno is one of the best dramedies of all time. Because Jojo Rabbit is a movie that when it's funny, it's hysterical.
Very funny. Yeah.
When it's dramatic.
Yeah, that one moment, the butterfly.
When that moment, and if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That moment, my theater, which had been, chuckling, laughing, like, ah, ha, ha, oh, dead silent.
Yeah,
dead silent. Like, not a breath was heard in that theater during the movie. And then, like, as the scene played out, a couple people started just quietly crying. And it's like, yeah. Like, it's a movie that does what I think something like The Boy in Striped Pajamas tries to do, which is this whole idea of, like,
yeah, that movie don't age well at all, though. I don't know it was so much nonsense behind the scenes with it. Yeah, it's real bullshit I hear. I didn't know that. At the time, I thought it was like a great movie. I'm like, no, apparently these movies are real nonsense.
Oh, yeah, no, it's absolute nonsense. And I think that, like, despite being a comedy rather than, like, a serious drama like The Boy in Striped Pajamas, JoJo actually hits more on that reality. Because I think that one of the things about JoJo is that it absolutely understands the kind of cognitive dissonance, the kind of disconnect that comes from being a child in a world you don't understand. But also, even if you understood it, the world wouldn't make that much sense. Because, like, again, little boy living in Nazi Germany, there's just so much around him he has it on good faith that it makes sense because all the adults are telling him, but the adults are also telling him different things. And there's elements of it that just, like, there's just so many aspects of it that are just like, and it's hard to be a child in that kind of environment. And, like, it's hard to grow up. It's hard to, like, make sense. Like, and, like, there's people who think that this movie has, like, I don't know, insincere moments is probably the best way I could put it, because I don't like using words like, cheesy or hammy or whatever. And I think that those can best be explained as this is a child. This is an actual child. This movie is rooted in the subjective perspective of a child.
Yeah.
And that child trying to make sense of the world, it's so heartbreaking. It's so devastating. Weirdly enough, another brilliant David Bowie needle drop, which is apparently a theme on my list for some reason. But yeah, so Jojo Rabbit 2019. Sadly, it seems like it, unless the man pulls a rabbit out, rabbit out of a hat, this might be the culmination of Taika Waititi, who at one point was a filmmaker I would have counted among my favorites, but he just hasn't been able to live up to the standard he set with this movie since. And yeah, I want the best for him. I want him to surprise me, but at the time it just kind of looks, like this was his peak, in his own Academy Award for, best adapted screenplay for that. So yeah. Moving on, 2021. There's no good segue for this one, really. David Lowery's The Green Knight.
Nice.
Almost
It's like,
love it.
Almost made it. Almost made some of this. And I ate for a couple of 824s, but Uncut Gems was like the one that had to beat it up. So.
All right, CC, if I could just say one thing, The Green Knight has one of the best teaser trailers ever, in my opinion. That first trailer that dropped, and that music and just the imagery with, Dev Patel's character, in the throne and whatnot, has been burnt into my memory. Like, ever since I saw that ad, I love that trailer so much. That's all I have to say. Go on.
Like, I think that The Green Knight does a brilliant job of capturing the absolute, because here's the thing. When we think about medieval art, we think about medieval poetry and writing and plays and narratives, all that stuff. I think we make it a little more normal than it actually is. because when you actually read the medieval stuff, and I'm someone who read The Green Knight at a fairly young age growing up, it's very strange. A lot of medieval literature is actually very peculiar in just kind of this bizarre way in which the real world, like the pagan world and the Christian world, are existing side by side, and modernity is clashing with the ancient times. And there's like, there's this real perceivable world, and then there's this magic world that seems to exist just beneath the surface of it. And The Green Knight captures that majestically, like absolutely perfectly. Like it captures that weird kind of world and creates this setting that's all its own. David Lowery is a filmmaker that I mean, like, he's genuinely pleasantly surprised me in general. I was pleasantly surprised by his remake of Pete's Dragon, of all things. Yeah. Like a genuinely great drama in a sea of otherwise mediocre Disney live action remakes.
It's one of the better ones here. Pong for Pong is one.
It is one of it's much one because it completely reinvents the material. But yeah, The Green Knight is just such a delightfully bizarre, but also such a faithful imagining. But then also a film that actually, again, talking about these ideas of masculinity, it is a film that understands the chivalry, because it's a movie that understands that chivalry was invented as a way to keep rogue masculinity in check, essentially. Like, the reason that the society created chivalry, it's similar to Bushido in Japan. These were not things that were just invented out of some kind of enlightenment. It was a response to a crisis of roving bands of armed men, and this idea we needed to create some kind of moral code to try and center them a little bit, and to try and, restrict the amount of pillaging and the amount of just destruction that level of unchecked masculinity inflicts upon a land and a people and a culture. Green Knight understands this perfectly. And I think that Sir Gawain's struggles to live up to the chivalric standards throughout the film, right up to that brilliant ending, is one of the things that keeps the film so grounded despite talking foxes and giants. So no, The Green Knight, masterpiece. Moving to the next year, a film that, again, I will not talk about super long, because when this film came out, it was my pick for my favorite of 2022. So if you, again, longtime listener of the show, you remember which film I'm talking about. A film that came not out of nowhere, but a film that kind of emerged onto the scene and completely rewrote the rules for the way we talked about certain countries internationally and the way we talked about action cinema.
Yep.
RRR. Yep. From SS Rajamouli.
Nice.
Rise, Roar, Revolt, people. Still a masterpiece. Still obsessed. Still amazing. Gold. If we're talking about the last 25 years of filmmaking, I just want to point out that both of the Indian films I have on this list were submitted to the Academy but I think it's so important to acknowledge something. Lagan was only submitted for Best Foreign Film. And when they submitted it, the Academy made them present a cut with all the songs removed, which is probably one of the worst things I've ever heard the Academy ever do. By the time we get to RRR, 18 years later, the film is not only submitted for, I think, Best Foreign Film, but it is actually submitted in multiple categories and wins several of them. And I think that it's an amazing statement to kind of talk about the way in which America is finally starting to understand and appreciate Indian cinema. Some of us have been ahead of the curve on that one for a while, right? Like, I am talking to Three Trinities. Like, we already we already know in cinema is great. We already know this is not news to us. Yeah. But it was great. But it was great to see a film like RRR finally make Americans sit up and go, wait a minute, what are they doing over there? And I'm like, great stuff. You should go check it out.
Yeah. And speaking of songs, right? That performance of Natu Natu, boy, at the Academy Awards, boy, that was a moment. That was a moment. Yeah.
That was I never would have thought. If you looked back at, again, Lagan having to cut all its songs out to the performance of Natu Natu at the Academy, it's like, we have been on a journey. And being able to kind of think about that is absolutely insane to me. Next two are both from 2023. And they're both films I talked about on your podcast that year. So I will not spend too much time on them before getting to my number one pick. And they are Oppenheimer.
Of course.
Masterpiece. I was so surprised. Again, Nolan is a filmmaker who's very much crept up on me. If you would ask me again, as someone who I've also gone on a journey over the last 25 years. There was definitely a time when I was getting into cinema where Nolan was not someone I was especially excited about or interested in. And then Oppenheimer made me rethink my entire perspective on the man. And Oppenheimer is this intelligent, tight, stylish historical thriller. Is a movie that I just like. Again, a movie I come back to, a movie I obsess about, and even like all these years after, even 2 years after it's come out, I still think about it a lot. Especially again, talking about movies with brilliant last lines, and then also from 2023, also a historical drama. Also incredibly stylistically creative and interesting, but from a director who I've loved for a while. And it's amazing to see him be able to create a film like this in his like late Kurosawa era, Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. One of the most just absolute masterpiece. Like one of the best examples of like, a really brilliant example of like, true crime. On a really brilliant, but also like a really interesting like examination of that genre, but also like actual historical wrongs, the history of like indigeneity in America. There's just so much going on in that movie, and I think that Scorsese is in his masterpiece era because again, Silence, The Irishman, and Killers of the Flower Moon.
Right.
What a run!
Silence almost made the list.
Silence almost made my list, but again, I had to limit myself to one filmmaker, and I was like, what is the best movie Scorsese made over the last 25 years? And I had to pick Killers, because Killers as this like anti-Western like movie about indigenous struggles. Also, a filmmaker in his 80s having the humility to take a project that he was developing and turn it over to the people who made it. Like a lot of the indigenous collaborators on that film will always flag that Scorsese essentially let them rework the material and kind of let them collaborate with him and change the way the film, like again, Scorsese said when he was first developed it, it was going to be much more about the murders and kind of the investigation of the early FBI, but it became a story about indigeneity. And I think that like seeing that level of humility and that openness to collaboration from such an established, respected filmmaker is truly one of the most humbling things I think I've seen over the last 25 years. But now we're at the number one spot. We have talked about genre. We've talked about drama. We've talked about comedy. We've talked about music. We've talked about narrative, performance-driven, directors, and it's like, what film could possibly occupy, and I'm cheating because it's not the most recent film, I'm technically cheating, what film could possibly occupy that spot as my favorite, one of my favorite, if not my favorite work of art over the last 25 years in cinema? And I have to say, it is not a film, it is a trilogy.
But of course,
from 2014, 2017, and 2023, and that is James Gunn's masterpiece, The Guardians of the Galaxy.
But of course,
as we are 2 years from the conclusion of the trilogy at this point. We are 2 years away from the conclusion of the trilogy. And I think we are only now starting to realize the effect that those films had on blockbuster filmmaking and like kind of American filmmaking in general. Like, again, you look at like, I think about how the first film came along and completely, I mean, everyone in this episode has talked about Marvel at least once. And I think the thing that's really interesting is that we all kind of like, one of the most influential Marvel films is the first Guardians, because look at the way Marvel movies looked before Guardians, look at the way they look after Guardians, look at how they were more interested in engaging with,
I consider the tipping point of the MCU. I would say if this works, anything could work. And it worked. Yeah.
It worked so well. And like the second film where Gunn really, which is my favorite of the three, to be entirely clear, my favorite is the second, where Gunn really doubles down on the emotionality and really doubles down on this idea of like, at the end of the day, this is a drama about survivors of childhood abuse who are trying because here's the thing. The first film was about them coming together. The second film was about them staying together. And then the third film was about them being ready to move on. And I think the thing that's so beautiful about that is that, like, the thing with trauma is, people with these types of traumas have tendencies to self-sabotage their relationships. They have tendencies to push people away. They have tendencies to bring out the thorniest parts of their personalities as if they're trying to test people around them. And Gunn understands this as someone who himself kind of went through similar unhealthy behaviors. The Guardians trilogy is such a beautiful roadmap for kind of that healing journey from, I am someone who has suffered from this trauma, and can I be in relationships with people? Oh, I can. What does that look like? How can I can I still stay in those relationships without, I think about the sequence where Yondu confronts Rocket all the time. Like the bit where he finally is like, I know who you are, boy, because you're me bit, as just one of the best dramatic sequences in any film that came out over the last 25 years. It is so well staged, scored, performed, especially since going back to what we were saying about Lord of the Rings, how motion capture and performance capture technologies become so important. Again, you have a scene like that played between two actors, one of whom is digital, and it still hits so incredibly well. Every Guardians movie feels like it pushes the boundaries and raises the bar. And again, I love James Gunn's films in general. Again, you talk about Superman, talk about Suicide Squad, talking about Slither. These are talking about, yes, even though Super is, my God, so complicated. But this is a man whose career has been, just banger after banger after banger after banger. My God, really intelligent, really emotionally intelligent, and really interested in the craft of it, and also very willing to collaborate, and very much assembles a crew of collaborators who frequently work with him on different projects. He could not have made Superman if he had not made the Guardians trilogy. And at this point in his career, the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy is James Gunn's magnum opus as a filmmaker. And I am nothing but excited to see where he goes from here with this, and then Superman, and then whatever he works on going forward. Even if he stays doing comic book stuff for the rest of his career, I will be happy. If he pivots into maybe experiments with other genre stuff, I'll be happy. If he goes and does maybe the occasional non-genre drama, he does an experiment Nightmare, that Del Toro did with Nightmare Alley, I will be happy. I will just be happy if James Gunn continues to make movies and that they are as good as the Guardians trilogy.